You're listening to a podcast appearing on the Two Guys Talking Podcast Network.
This is the Weekly Firecast, episode 18, Odds and Ends and a Look Towards the Future.
Strap yourselves in. It's time for the Weekly Firecast. This is the podcast for all foodies, those who love food that is cooked over a fire or feels like fire in your mouth. If you love spice, smoke, sauce, and all things savory, this is the show for you. And now, here's your host, chili head and barbecuer, Scott Roberts.
Welcome, everybody, to this abbreviated, short, small, little edition of the Weekly Firecast. This is just something I'm pushing out in the middle of the holidays. Hope everyone is doing well. For everyone who celebrates Christmas, I hope you had the best Christmas ever. Wherever life finds you, I hope that you are doing spectacularly well. Me, I'm doing pretty good. I'm still battling some nasty throat cold sinus thing. Last year in December 2011, I had this thing for a month, and it really affected my voice. Boy, I'm hoping this doesn't last a month for me. It's been almost a couple weeks. I don't know if you can tell in this recording, but yeah, my throat is very scratchy. You know, if I raise my voice too much, if I try to hit any high notes, so to speak, my voice will just kind of go out. So, gonna try and keep it easy with this and the voiceover stuff for at least another week or two. But there's not going to be any interview, there's not going to be any review this week. So just hang tight, don't stop this podcast yet. I'm only going to take a few more minutes, but I just want to give thanks to a few people and kind of tell you where the podcast is going to go for the year 2013. And first of all, I want to give my extended gratitude towards several people for help making this podcast possible. One, of course, I got to start out with all of you people for downloading, for subscribing to the link on iTunes, for providing the feedback that you have, for helping to promote it, to retweet it, to share it on Facebook. I don't have time to thank every single person who's done that. As a matter of fact, I don't know every single person who's done all that. But I just want to give a heartfelt thank you for everyone who has done that so far. I'd also like to thank Mike Wilkerson, my partner at the Two Guys Talking Podcast Network. He's my co-host for the Dexter podcast that we do over there. He has been such a big support, a big mentor in the past 3 years. I've known him for probably 4 or 5 years. There was a little group in the St. Louis area called the St. Louis Bloggers Guild that we were members of. That's how we met initially. But since then, he's brought me into the whole podcasting fold. He's brought me into doing voiceovers. But all the knowledge and support and everything else that he's provided, I want to give a big thanks to Mike. Without him, I wouldn't be doing this at all. And I also want to give a shout out to Brian and Marilyn Mayer of Hot Sauce Daily and the old Hot Sauce Weekly podcast. I know Brian kind of wanted to keep the demise of the Hot Sauce Weekly podcast kind of quiet. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but yeah, they are kind of letting that podcast run down. They're kind of letting that podcast just kind of quietly peter out, and that's okay. They gave it a great run. To me, it really set the template for the Weekly Firecast. You know, what I do doesn't deviate too much from what they had set up. Of course, I'm very proud and very thrilled to be a part of that first podcast for hot sauces and fiery foods that they created in Hot Sauce Weekly. It was probably about 4 years ago. Brian and I were just talking on the phone one day, and he asked me what my thoughts on podcasting were, if I was a big podcast listener, and I said, of course I was. I've been listening to technology podcasts since about 2005. For any of you out there who know what, the This Week in Tech is, TWIT, if they remember the old CNET Buzz Out Loud, I listen to those things probably since the first month or two. Anyway, get back to what I was saying. Brian expressed interest in creating the Hot Sauce podcast. Now, there were a few barbecue podcasts out there, including Barbecue Central with Greg Rempe, which is still going strong, and I'll mention him in a minute. But Brian and I tossed around a few ideas, and he initially asked me if he wanted to co-host the Hot Sauce Weekly podcast with me. And I wasn't quite sure how that would fly. I think what I ended up doing is I volunteered to record little reviews for him, little hot sauce reviews, for him just to kind of plug into the episode. So for about the first dozen episodes, he had another co-host named Randy Combs. And then slowly he brought in his wife, Marilyn Mayer, who I think was a great, indispensable asset to the show. So eventually Randy Combs was phased out, and then Brian and Marilyn just ran with it. It was great listening for a good couple years. I invite you to go back and listen to some of the episodes that they had at hotsauceweekly.com. As a matter of fact, I interviewed them, I think it was in episode 3 of the Weekly Firecast. I talked to them, just about things in general. Their website, Hot Sauce Daily, which they continue, and that goes very strong to this day. But anyway, I wanted to give a big thanks to Brian and Marilyn for the friendship, for the support that they've given, and eventually just give me kind of a launching pad for the Weekly Firecast, at least the audio edition that I started earlier this summer. I think it was August that the first episode was put out. And here we are at the end of the year. So, thanks to them. And then someone I just mentioned a minute ago, Greg Rempe of thebbqcentralshow.com. Now, many of you barbecuers know Greg already. I mean, he is the man when it comes to media, well, I should say online media, when it comes to the whole world of barbecue, grilling, and smoking. Now, there are other shows and videos and podcasts, and a lot of great ones, too, from people out there. But I think Greg Rempe's Barbecue Central radio show is still the gold standard. It is still the podcast by which all other barbecue podcasts are measured. He does such a fantastic job. And I've been a guest on his show for, I don't know, a good few years now, just doing barbecue sauce and seasoning and rub reviews on there. Now, Greg was also a big support and an inspiration for the initial Weekly Firecast video. And you may or may not know he did the intros for all the shows, at least the video versions, which you can still find at YouTube on my YouTube channel. Just search up Scott Roberts Web and you can watch all of and I think there were 18 different video Weekly Firecasts from 2010 through probably this year when I did the last one. So huge thanks to Greg. And of course there are just so many other people in the fiery foods and blogging world, so many people just in my life who have just inspired me, who've helped out in one way or the other. Much too many to thank in this episode, so I'm just going to give a blanket thank you to everybody. I'm going to quickly answer a little bit of feedback that I had before I talk about, what lies ahead for the show. One person wrote in, and this was a little while back. I don't have their email in front of me. I don't have their name, so I apologize for that. But they had basically asked me, hey, Scott, why don't you do some recipes on the Weekly Firecast? And you know what? I would absolutely love to be able to do it. But I think an audio podcast is the wrong medium to do a recipe in. But think of it this way. Now I could talk about, how to create some, wild great new sauce or a dish that you'd be dying to try. But the thing is, it just wouldn't be very good radio. Or, you know what I mean. It wouldn't be very good to listen to an audio format because I would have to rattle off the ingredients list, all the exact measurements of the ingredients, go through it step by step of how to create this, then mix this, add that. And the thing is, I would end up pointing you to something that's written anyway. Because think of it this way. If I would rattle off the ingredients list, you would have to sit and write it down or type it out or do something. Have it in written or printed format. So therefore, I would just be pointing you to a blog post instead. So I think, well, why not just do the blog post about it? And kind of skip the whole podcast portion of it altogether, because that in and of itself would be kind of useless. So yeah, a recipe in and of itself, yeah, I like seeing them, and they're a vital part of cooking and food, but I just don't think it translates very well to a podcast. At least I have not seen a way in which it's presented very well. So I kind of hope that explains my stance on it. I'm not poo-pooing recipes at all. They have their place. They work very well with video because you get to see everything. And just like I mentioned a blog post, because you have the ingredients list there, you have all the instructions step by step that you can look back and can refer to every couple minutes as you're in your kitchen. So, well, there you have it. Now, I've gotten a little bit of feedback from people, and of course it's expected. What I'm talking about is the barbecue people will want more barbecue and grilling coverage. The people who are hardcore chili pepper growers will want more grow tips and gardening tips and, what happens when, this happens to my leaves, certain spots form on it. They want all that kind of coverage. And then there have been one or two of you, the really hardcore hot sauce, extract, 2 million Scoville unit sauce people who just want to hear coverage about only that. From what I heard of you, most of you guys have said things in a nice way. There were very few jerks I've heard from. But the thing goes, you can't please everybody, especially when I choose to have the type of format that I do. It's going to cover everything that I'm into, which is the specialty hot sauces. And for that matter, condiments and wing sauces and salsa. It's going to cover barbecue. Now, I'm probably not going to get too deep into the whole barbecue competition world. I really don't follow things that closely. To me, it's just cooking at home. and how you yourself could produce the best grilled and smoked meats out there. And then when it comes to chili peppers themselves, a lot of chili heads, hot sauce fanatics, are not gardeners. They don't grow the ghost peppers and Trinidad scorpion peppers themselves. But there are a lot of you who do. So what I try to do, I just try to strike a good balance. Some months the coverage may seem a little lopsided, and you know what? It's probably going to lean towards fiery foods in general. Actually, what I wanted to get into and kind of close out this little abbreviated edition of the Weekly Firecast was to talk about where the podcast is going to be headed. No, I don't want it to be just a sauce maker of the week. I don't want it to be just an interview with somebody, a struggling young company. But there are plenty of those out there, and I will feature lots of them. There are phenomenal artisan craft sauce, and for that matter, there's seasoning makers out there who deserve all kinds of exposure, and I want to give them some of that exposure. But it's not going to be all about that. In this coming year, I want to get the guests who will talk about the sauce and barbecue business a little bit more. I want to talk about, how to grill the perfect steak. And tentatively, I'm going to have some guests lined up. Now, the few of the names I can mention as far as a future guest, in no particular order, I'm going to have Blair Lazar of Blair Sauces and Snacks. And also, there's going to be Lynn Kozarski of Blackwood's Wing Sauce, a great up-and-coming wing sauce manufacturer from New Jersey. I'm going to have Tim Bader of Volcanic Peppers. He has all kinds of great chili pepper products, including some exceptional seasonings and dried chili pepper mixes. I'm going to have Dan Arnold of Suckle Busters. He's more along the lines of, barbecue sauces and seasonings. And then there are a few others I've talked to, but no interview has been set up yet. But it's something I'm going to tackle in the next couple weeks. So these are just some of the names and the people and things that you can expect over the next few months. And of course, the hardcore barbecuers out there, you will barbecue and smoke year-round. You won't let cold weather put a damper on all of your outdoor cooking activities. I'm kind of the same way. You have to admit, it really becomes grilling and outdoor cooking season in North America. So I'm probably going to have a little bit more coverage when it comes to that kind of stuff in March and April and May. Then we're also going to have the big Chili Pepper Fiery Foods Festival and Show season start up here shortly. Zest Fest in Texas is going to happen in January. I want to cover that and talk to the promoters about that. The National Fiery Foods and Barbecue Show is going to take place in March out in Albuquerque. Of course, I want to give coverage of that, and there are just all kinds of things going on. And here in the U.S., NFL football season is coming to a close. We're going to have the playoffs. We're going to have the Super Bowl. That's one reason I want to cover buffalo wings. And with all that, there might be a few new segments introduced in the show coming later this year. I'm not going to divulge in any of the details, or even things haven't been 100% fleshed out yet. But I'll let you guys all know when something new is about to happen, or if any special guests pop up. But I'm sure it's something that most of you will enjoy. But still, I want to hear from you. Keep the feedback coming in. If you have suggestions for the show, if you have specific guests that you want me to talk to and recommend to me, by all means do it. Or if you want to be interviewed and heard by thousands here on a Weekly Firecast, if you have a company that makes hot sauce, barbecue sauce, seasonings or rubs, condiments, any kinds of snacks or edibles, or if you're a barbecue competition team, you want to talk about cooking in general, how to cook ribs, chicken, pork shoulder, whole hog, brisket, you name it. Or if you just want to give your thoughts on, the best way to make steaks and burgers out on the grill. Or if you have any product out there related to cooking in general, anything related to chili peppers or spicy food, I want to hear from all of you if you want to be a guest. If you do, contact me today and let me know. You can just simply go to the number 2guystalking.com, go to the Weekly Firecast page. There's going to be a contact form. Right now, the contact form is on the lower left side of the page. Look for the left-hand sidebar. Scroll down, you'll see the simple web contact form. Fill it out. Say, hey, Scott, this is who I am. I want to talk about blah, blah, blah. I'd like to be on your show. And the same goes for anybody who has feedback in general about the show. You can fill out the web form and let me know. And probably lastly, all the support that you've given, any way that you could help promote the Weekly Firecast is greatly appreciated. One big way to do it is to go to iTunes and rate and review the show. Just go to any web page with the Weekly Firecast. You can go to my blog, scottrobertsweb.com. You can go to weeklyfirecast.com. You can go to the site I just mentioned, twoguystalking.com/Firecast. Go to any of the iTunes links that will go to the iTunes page for the podcast. Right now, there's a big blue button on the left-hand side of the page to view it in iTunes. Simply click on that. It will open iTunes up for you, and all you need to do is write a few sentences about what you love, what you truly think about the Weekly Firecast, and submit it, and all the ratings and reviews will help out just astronomically. It will help push the Weekly Firecast up in the charts of iTunes. Technically not the charts, but the positioning. When iTunes shows the food podcast on there, the more ratings and reviews the Weekly Firecast will have, the higher and more prominently it will be displayed. So you're helping everyone learn more about fiery foods and hot sauce and chili peppers and barbecue from someone who truly loves it, me. There's a lot of media out there. There's a lot of misinformation, especially some of the things you'll find like on the Food Network. Some of just the watered-down crap. Well, you won't get it from here. You'll get the straight scoop. You'll get the truth. You'll get real talk about chili peppers and the passion and the love for hot foods and stuff that's grilled and smoked. So if you want to see that passion thrive on iTunes, please rate it and review it. And I thank you very much for everything. And, well, maybe not lastly. I said lastly for the thing before. There's been a lot of sponsors for ScottRobertsWeb.com. And right now, I'm also looking for sponsors for the Weekly Firecast. So if you're interested in sponsoring the show, getting your name out to hardcore fans of the types of food that we all know and love, contact me today and let me know. So, but before I go on and on, I think I'll just end this episode. Again, thank you to everybody for your ongoing support. And who knows, 2013, things might really explode and things become big in a few certain areas. I certainly hope that they do. For the entire world of fiery foods and barbecue. So anyway, I'm Scott Roberts. God bless you all. Thank you. And remember, always keep it burning.
This has been the Weekly Firecast. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast via iTunes or at the official website at scottrobertsweb.com/Weekly Firecast. The Weekly Firecast is part of the Two Guys Talking podcast network. For more information on other great Two Guys Talking programming, you can go to twoguystalking.com. That's the number 2, guystalking.com. Thanks for listening. And remember, keep it burning.